Brahma Gururvishnu Gururdevo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Yapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Twameva Mata Chapita Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha Twameva Vedya Dravidam Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So what verse are we on?
Chapter 18, number 200.
Will you help us out, please, Aditi?
Yes. Tasmadatyanta magdeshu kurvityeta dvirodhyataha na kalpamo shrutatvacha shrutatyago nartakaha. We do not therefore admit the injunction of an action in the beginning, end, or middle, for it is not contradictory and not to be met with in the Vedas. Not only so, we have in that case to give up what is there in them, and that would be harmful.
So again, the idea here that Shankara is working on is, what is this distinction between the Jiva Bhavana, this reflection of consciousness caught in the subtle intellect, and the self? All agency, all activity is done by the upadis, the equipment. What happens? Based on the impressions from the past, which are in the causal body, our vasanas, they impel the mind into being restless, discontent, which then sprouts as a desire, which then moves to a thought, and then into action. The agent is this function in the subtle intellect. Goes by various names. Karta, the doer. Jiva Bhavana, the feeling that I'm a person. Ahankriti, things that cause the sense of I as an individual. Chidabhasa, the reflection of consciousness. Chitchaya, the shadow self, has many, many different names. But the main thing for us to be aware of is the self has no agency. The self doesn't get realized. The self is already liberated. What happens is a transformation of the mind. That's where agency takes place. So the mind, because of its ignorance, thinks I am the body. Based on direct experience, the mind then comes to the deep insight. Oh, I'm not an individual. I'm not the body. I'm the space of pure awareness. Now, mind you, neither state affects the self. Next verse.
Yathanu Puyate Tripti Bhujirva Kyana Gamyate Vakyasya Vitritis Tadva Doshakritpaya Sikriya. Objection. The bliss of liberation is not obtained by ascertaining the meaning of the sentence, unlike the satisfaction which is felt by eating. Just as boiled milk rice cannot be prepared with cow dung, so the direct knowledge of Brahman cannot be produced simply by ascertaining the meaning of the sentence.
So what we're dealing with, the objection here is, okay, so now I understand the meaning of the Vedic injunction, the Upanishad, you are that, or the self is Brahman. So that in and of itself does not reveal my blissful nature. So what we're going to be dealing with is the distinction between paroksha jnanam, indirect knowledge, and aparoksha jnanam, direct knowledge. We're having a bit of a synchronous moment here because we had a long discussion on this Monday, studying our Panchadashi text. So what do we have to understand? So first we have the indirect knowledge. I read the scripture, I hear it from the teacher. We have Shravana, we have Mananam, I think about it. But then I must verify this in the laboratory of my own experience. How can I come to the direct experience? As Shankara will say, Chidananda Rupaham. My form is bliss consciousness. So just as on a bright sunny day like today, I can go outside and look up at the sun and I see the sun is an orb. The sun has heat, the sun has light. On an overcast day, I go out and I go, oh, it's cold today, no sun. Has the sun really been affected? No. But here on Earth, the heat of the sun and the orb of the sun is occluded by the clouds. Likewise, we never lose the sat quality of the self. It's always there. We don't lose the chit quality. I am knowing. But the ananda is not available to me when the mind is covered by ignorance, and because of that, extroverts into the world. I want, I want, I want. It's the wanting itself that's so painful. Ego says the way to deal with that pain is to get what I want. More, better, different. Yoga says it's the wanting itself that's the problem. There's a wonderful little book out called Drop the Rock. We've been carrying this huge rock, the burden of egoism. Let it go. Let it go. Then the mind can easily come home. And because the self is the fountainhead, the source, the wellspring of bliss, the mind can become blissful. So we are not only a full knower of the Supreme, but the mind has retired into the Supreme. How do we do that? Let go of the world. Let it go. So let's see what Shankara says to resolve this doubt. Next verse.
Satyameva manatmartha vakyat paroksha bodhanam pratyagatmani na tvevam sankhya prapti vadadhruvam. Indirect knowledge, it is true, is the result produced by the sentences regarding the non-self. But it is not so in the case of those regarding the innermost self. It is, on the other hand, direct and certain knowledge like that in the case of the 10th boy.
So again, we had the story of the 10 boys who are canoeing or boating across the river. They capsize, they swim to the shore, and one boy counts those others and only finds 9 because he doesn't count himself. So also, what I need to know is I, me, myself, and that partless Brahman. What doesn't work is if I, Jim, am talking with someone else, say Mark, and I'm saying, what do you, Mark, think about the self? Well, this is what I think about the self. Well, what do you think about God or Brahman? Well, this is what I think about God or Brahman. As if self and Brahman is something other than me. So what we must start with is a direct experience. So frequently I'll hold up the phone or a cup or whatever it is I've got around. And I'll say, who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. Well, I'm not Brahman. I'm not the Atman. I'm a miserable creature. Let's just start with that direct experience. Now, do the discrimination. Discriminate between the seer and the seen, between nitya, anitya, vivechana, the discrimination between the eternal factor, me, and all that's changeable. And when I remove from my attention, my focus, everything that is knowable as an object, I see this I, that I am, is this eternal fact. It's always there. So this is this distinction between paroksha jnanam, indirect knowledge, and aparoksha jnanam, direct experience. Or in Gita, Krishna will call it jnanam vijnanam cha. Jnanam here meaning understanding, vijnana, deep, direct experience. The two must come together. Now, there are those who are well versed in the scriptures. They may wear the orange cloth, but have no samadhi. And they think this is all I need to know. The scriptures themselves are a valid means of knowledge. They are and they're not. They do reveal the absolute truth as paroksha jnana, indirect knowledge, which should inspire us to abhyas, practice, so that I have the direct experience. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Swayam vedyat paryayah swapramanaka ishatam navrittavahama siddha satmano nubhavachanaha. Therefore, accept the self as self-evident, which means the same thing as self-knowable. The knowledge of the innermost self, according to us, thus becomes possible when the ego vanishes.
Yes. So, how do you know you are you? The world, gross and subtle, is known by what we call the triputi, the triple factor. Knower, knowing, and known. I, Jim, through seeing, know the coffee table. I, Jim, through hearing, know the traffic. Go through all five senses that way. I, Jim, through manas, mind, know feelings and judgments. I, Jim, through buddhi, know thoughts, memories, images. I, through buddhi, know the rise, the thickening and the thinning of ego. But how do you know yourself? Yourself is never known as an object. You will not have the experience in meditation. There it goes, I saw the self. You do not gain the experience of the self. Listen carefully. The self is difficult to realize, not because it's far away, but because of its profound ordinariness. It is so ordinary. It is the constant that is there all the time. What I need to rediscover is it never changes. It's never threatened. I can't improve it, but it also can't be diminished. And I love the term chaya. Chaya in Sanskrit means both reflection and shadow. Because when you have this introversion of the attentive faculty, and we start with who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. Okay, go look for what I think is the individual me. Then you may come up with, oh, I'm a miserable worm. Well, do you see your misery? Yes. Well, you're not the misery. You're the know the misery. Okay. I'm sad. You're not a sad person. You're the knower of sadness. I'm so successful, I'm smart. Who knows that thought? You're not the smart and successful ideas. Who are you? And as all these thoughts drop away, that shadow self, that counterfeit self falls, because it's not an entity. It's an obfuscation. It's a mental covering. And in a quiet mind, in the space between your thoughts, notice the knower itself. ch18 Rupa. My form is pure existence. Awareness itself. No sorrow touches it. And then returning from that quietude, the subtle intellect goes, oh, I get it. Nobody there. So that's why the scriptures say it is unknowable and yet knowable. It is not knowable as an object. Those of us who just finished our study of Cana Upanishad, we had the story that Agni goes to the adorable spirit, can't find out who it is. Then Vayu goes to the adorable spirit, can't find out who it is. Agni is the sense of sight. Vayu is the sense of touch. And that's just a metaphor for all the five senses. Then Indra goes. Want to find out who this adorable spirit is, and the damn spirit disappears. Meaning, when I turn my mind, that phony self, counterfeit self. Then Cana says, like a flash of lightning. Two ways to look at it. In the beginning, it's just, oh, I got it. Just a little bit of a glimpse, then the mind comes back. But when you finally see it, it's sudden. There's no process of self-realization. Either see it or you don't, like a flash of light. There's a process in purifying the mind. But if you've superimposed an imaginary snake onto the rope on the ground, you can't say, I've been doing rope meditation for 20 years. The head of the snake has turned into rope. It's not how it works. You are either still deluded and you're convinced there's a snake there, or you thoroughly investigate and you see, boy, it sure looked like a snake, but I see now it's nothing but a rope. I thought I was a person. For lifetimes, I thought I was a person. But I never was. It's not like the person becomes Brahman. The person walks along the road and it's dusk and he sees a mugger, a robber there. Someone else comes up with a lantern, holds it up and says, "My dear sir, there's no robber there. It's a post. Where did the robber go? He was never there in the first place." So I think I'm a person. I'm my body. And I have all these issues. Thin the mind, introvert the attentive faculty. Who are you? And that ego falls. Because it was never a person. It was never an entity. You are the entity. Next verse. Are you there, Aditi?
I was muted. Buddhinan vishayo dukkam no yasya vishayamataha kutosya dukkha sambandho drisheha syat pratyagatmanaha. Pain is a property belonging to the intellect. How can it, therefore, belong to the innermost self, which is of the nature of pure consciousness and not connected with pain?
So the word he's using here is dukkha, which I would prefer to translate as suffering rather than pain. I think of pain more as a physiological issue. The body will always have, pain and good feelings. That's just its nature. But the suffering is what goes on in my mind when I have non-conducive environments. But I know happiness and I know suffering. Now, are these two separate things? So if I come home at night and I unlock the door and the apartment is dark, do I have to turn off the darkness before I turn on the light? Are darkness and light two things? Like I think suffering and happiness are. No. Darkness is the substratum when light isn't there. Light moves in and through the darkness. So cool is in Sanskrit, the word Krishna means dark or black. So the eternal substratum of me is Krishna, which is Ananda. I come into the apartment, I turn on the light. My mind turns on craving, and I get suffering. I don't have to turn on happiness as opposed to turning on the suffering. All I need to do to make the apartment dark is turn off the light. All I need do to be happy is turn off the craving. Let go. Let go. Just as dark is the substratum that light exists in, so the self is the eternal factor, the context for everything. And mind goes by and I watch it. Feelings go by and I watch them. They never touch the substratum. It's like the light never touches the darkness. But if my mind thinks I am not enough, or the world is not enough, and I get caught up in the struggle of ego. Ego says, go for it. Get the people, places, things, and conditions. Yoga says, you can do whatever you wish. But if you want to be happy, let go of attachment. Let go of identification. So simple. Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham Shivoham. My form, my nature is bliss consciousness. I am Shiva. I am auspiciousness itself. It's not out there. Next verse.
Rishirdevanubhuyeta svenaivanubhavatmana tada bhasataya janma dhiyo syanubhava smritaha. The witness is known by itself, which is of the nature of knowledge only. It is the birth of the modification of the intellect pervaded by the reflection of consciousness that is what is known to be the knowledge of the self.
So, again, two kinds of knowledge here. There is a perfect knowledge, the real knowledge with a big old capital R. And that is the self-evidence of the self. It, in fact, is the only real knowledge. The only thing you will ever know for sure is you. Then there is this pratyabhignana, this recognition, this aparoksha jnana, this direct experience which happens to the subtle intellect. When it realizes this truth. Over and over again, we've talked about how you can reflect on a direct experience. They're two different things. So that's why the scriptures say both bondage and liberation occur to the mind, the self is ever free. But, you might think, well, this Vedanta is cheap. I don't need to do anything. The self is already liberated. That is true. But why am I unhappy? You're stupid. That's why you're unhappy. Your mind is in the state of spiritual ignorance, avidya. Because of that, the mind thinks I'm a person, I'm my body, and I am bereft. I'm spiritually impoverished. I need stuff. That's all my problem. How do I get out of that suffering? Find out who I am. What is it that finds that out? It's the mind. By a direct experience, not just the acquisition of information. Then it's able to let go of the tyranny of the superimposition. Next verse.
Ashanayadi nirmuktaha siddho mokshasthamev saha shrotavyadi tavetyet virruddha katha muchyate. How can you speak of the hearing, etc., of the self on your part, which is a contradiction when you are the eternally existing liberation, free from hunger, etc.?
So, again, the self does not get liberated. The self is already free. It is not that which gets get realized. That happens to the intellect. But we don't discount that experience, even though it occurs in Maya. Self does not suffer. It's the mind that suffers. What does the mind need to see? Fundamentally, its own unreality. You can't think a real thought. No idea of self is real. Only you are real. Next one.
Setsyati deva chetatsya shravanadi tada bhavet mokshasya nityatevam syat virodhe nanyatha vachaha. Hearing, etc., would be necessary if liberation to be brought about, but it would be transitory in that case. The sentence, therefore, can have no other meaning in the presence of inconsistency.
So, if I gain this scriptural knowledge and I think I, the ego, am going to be liberated, meaning I want to be a realized person, then the mind will always be afflicted by thoughts. Is this it? Am I realized, or am I fooling myself? Or, oh, maybe I've lost my realization. I'm still focused on a kind of person. trying to be a realized person is like the person who's about ready to commit suicide thinking, I can't wait till I see cousin Bill at my funeral. I'll just glare at him. He's the cause of all this. How satisfied I'll feel to see him so full of shame and guilt at my funeral. That's nuts. Nobody attends their own funeral. Two kinds of people in the world: those who think they're a person. Remember, Shankara defines vairagya. Part of it is that desire to give up all personal sense of self, all identification, starting with the body up to and including the form of Brahma, the creator, meaning I'm a powerful person. And in there also is I think I'm some big spiritual mucky muck. No. No, you are Brahman. Which is more real, the nightmare or the pleasant dream? Neither is real. No personal sense of self is real. You either think you're a person, if you do, you're deluded, or you know you are Brahman and you have given up concern for stupid ego states. Other people can have all sorts of opinions about you. They're welcome to them. But do you know what your essential nature is? Any questions about this? That's why there's that very famous Zen slogan: if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Meaning, if you think you're an enlightened person, drop that idea. No, you are shunyata, emptiness. Chidakasha, the space of consciousness itself. Next verse.
Shrotrishrotavyyorбhedo yadishta syadbhavedidam ishtartha kopa evam syan yuktam sarvatha vachaha. The repetition of the idea, I am Brahman, might be possible if there are a difference between the listener and what is listened to. The desired meaning would be wronged in that case. Therefore, the sentence becomes unreasonable, i.e., loses authority according to that view.
So the idea here is, while jnana abhyasa is what we do, we practice knowledge. It's not so much a vain repetition. I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. That doesn't do it. We use the spiritual injunction to point the mind inward. And there are corollaries to this. Of course, the famous one of Ramana Maharshi: who am I? To whom did this feeling occur? To me. Who am I? drop the feeling. Or the one my friend Justin came up with, which I absolutely love. Who cares? If I'm disturbed, who is it who's caring about it? Oh, that's just ego. Drop it. Self does not care. Keep bringing the mind back to the center. So the scriptural injunction, I am Brahman, aham brahmasmi, if incorrectly used, not free us. But if correctly used, then it will. Next verse.
Siddho moksho hamityeva gyatvatmanam bhavedyadi chikirshurya samudhatma shastram chodhata yatyapi. Knowing that one is eternally existing liberation, one who desires to perform actions is a man of clouded intellect and nullifies the scriptures.
The man of what intellect?
Clouded intellect.
Yes. So by performing actions here, we mean ego-prompted activity. So again, this is not about scoping out other people. If you in fact are a knower of Brahman, to test your own knowledge, does your mind still seriously extrovert into the world? I need this. I must have that. I can't stand this. I'm so annoyed by that. It means you have partial knowledge, intermittent knowledge, or perhaps only indirect knowledge. In Gita, Arjuna says, how does the Sthita Prajna Purusha, the person of steady wisdom, how do they act? How do they sit? How do they talk? How do they walk? And Krishna responds, when a person casts off all the desires of the mind or heart and is satisfied in the self, by the self, then they're said to be a person of steady wisdom. There it is. So this is why I like to say we're healed not so much by what we turn from, but by what we turn to. That last karika in the first chapter of the Mandukya Upanishad. Soak the mind in the roar of Om. With all its meaning, Om means that which is beyond this world is Om. This world is Om. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is verily nothing but God. Soak the mind. Sarvamaya, Sarvamananda. It's all Maya. It's all bliss. Next verse.
Nahi siddhasya kartavyam sakaryasya na siddhata ubhaya lambanam kurvan natmanam vancha vanchayat yat vanchayat vyapi. For knowing oneself to be Brahman, one has no duty to perform, nor can one be a knower of Brahman when one has duties to perform. One deceives oneself by having recourse to both sides.
So if you think, okay, I'm a knower of Brahman, and being in the world, it's all illusion, so I'm filled with a heart of desires, but it's all an illusion, so it doesn't matter. This is what I call the Vedanta logic loop. And what we do is rationalize our suffering. And here Shankara is saying, no. The mark of the person of steady wisdom is the mind no longer extroverts into the world. Now, our vasanas are strong for some of us. We're unable to give them up right away. But Shankara will say in other texts, at least don't embrace a rotting corpse thinking it's a beautiful bride. Know what you're doing. In Paul's letter to the Romans, he articulates this so clearly. I do not do that which I would do, and I do that which I hate. This disconnect between my values and my compulsions. So he says, therefore, it is not I that do it, but sin that is lodged in my limbs. Here, his use of sin is the exact same meaning as vasana. Just watch, watch, watch. No more fruitful meditation. Notice when you want something. Make friends with our dukkha, our suffering. Be clear, I'm not suffering because I don't have what I want. It's not the wrong job. It's not that my husband or wife isn't behaving. It's because I'm a fool and I'm stuck wanting. Own your ananda. When you satisfy a desire, notice what you've done is use the object to stop your mind from extroverting. Just a taste of your self-nature. No more fruitful practice than to see what's going on when the mind extroverts, when the mind comes. Such is the power of avidya that I forget that. I, Jim, am unhappy. because I'm not getting what I want. And then I have kartavya, obligatory action, struggle. And it's so painful. The more I want it, further away the object or situation seems to be, the more pain I have. I was talking with a person Saturday night who's just a mess. They're going through a divorce and they've realized, they're young, they're only 66. They were saying they only have enough money for the next 10 years. What are they going to do? They're desperate because 10 years down the road, they may have financial insecurity. I'm not saying not to plan, but certainly don't be full of fear. Right now, you're fine. Self in me is never touched. All right, next verse.
Siddho mokshastvamityeta dvastu matram pradarsyate shrotustatva vigyane pravritti syat katham tviti. Objection. If a reality is only pointed to, but no injunction be given, when one is told, "Thou art eternally existing with liberation," how can one apply oneself to know that one is so without being enjoined?
So, do you need obligatory action? Is there some action required in order to do that? This is this injunction. Does the injunction apply an effort or imply an effort? Let's see what Shankara says.
Karta dukkha hamasmiti pratyakshena karta dukhi cha ma bhuva miti yanto bhavet tataha. It is known by perceptual evidence that one is an agent and miserable, and then there is an effort so that one may not remain so.
Is that the reply or is that still part of the objection?
Still part of the objection.
Yes. So I'm miserable. I'm miserable because I don't have this, that, and the other thing. So I need to make efforts to get this, that, and the other thing. That's how I get out of my misery. So let's see if there's a reply.
The next one is still part of the objection. Tadvijnanaya yuktyadi kartavyam shrutira bravit kartritvadyannuvadena siddhatvanu. The Shruti, therefore, restates the agency, etc., on the part of the people and enjoins duties such as reasoning, etc., in order that they may know that they are eternally existing Brahman.
So we have actions to take up. The Shruti also says, do ritual to expiate papam and acquire punya. Is that what we need to do? Do we have to keep working all the time? So many people will say about the spiritual life, there's no destination. It's always a journey. I'm always a seeker. I'm always growing. I'm always working toward, God only knows what, but I'm working toward it. Effort, effort, effort. Let's see what he says.
Nirdukho nishkrayo kamaha siddho moksho hamiyati grahittveva viruddhartha madadhyata katham me vasaha. Reply. How can one accept an inconsistent meaning after knowing that one is eternally existing liberation, which is free from unhappiness, activity, and desires?
So the point here is ego is always telling me I'm a person and that's real. And I have to struggle to get what I want in order to be happy. What the scripture tells us is, no, you're not a person. You are that immortal Brahman. Therefore, give up the struggling itself. There's the very famous story of the king who gets loaded. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he's still drunk and it's dark. And he screams for the servants to come bring brooms to sweep out the darkness. It's not effective because sweeping does not contradict darkness. You need light. My problem is ignorance of my self-nature. I do not know I'm already free. I do not know that my self-nature is bliss absolute. What I've been looking for, I'm looking with. No amount of effort, struggle will resolve my real problem. Now, again, there's a paradox. That doesn't mean we don't need to do effortful things in order to purify the subtle intellect. I'm doing Tripura Rahasyam with a student. And Parashurama, who's got a mind like a brick, has to do ritual puja to the goddess for like 12 or 18 years. I can't remember the exact number. So that his mind is pure enough to receive the knowledge. In Gita, we've got 3 chapters on karma yoga before we even learn to meditate. Because a gross extroverted mind can't just snap your fingers and you let go of desire. It's not that simple. But in the end, it's that simple. All right, next one.
Sakama sakriyo siddha iti menu bhava katham ato me viparitasya tadbhavan va tu marhati. Objection. You should say why I, though of an opposite nature, should feel that I have desires and activities and am not Brahman.
So here the Shishu wants to know, why is it that I feel like I'm a person full of desires, and even though you've told me I am Brahman, I don't feel it, I don't experience it. Let's see if there's a reply.
Iheva ghatate prashno na muktatvanu bhutaye pramanena virodhi yaha sotrartha prashnamarhati. Reply. A question on this subject is reasonable, but it is not reasonable to ask why one is free. It is only a thing contrary to evidences that should be questioned.
So, this is a good question. But why one is free is like, let's see if I can use an example of this. Can't think of one. But something that's evident in all ways. Like, why does light travel at 186,000 miles per second? I don't know, but it does. Let's see what else he says. Going on.
Aham nirmukta ityeva sadasitya manajaha pratyakshabhasa janyatvat dukkitvam prashnamarhati. The knowledge that one is free arises from a different evidence, specifically the evidence, thou art that. Arising from fallacious perceptual evidence, unhappiness deserves an explanation.
Yes, so the question is, what is bondage? How does it come about? How does it continue to exist? How do I get out of it completely? Those are valid questions. The questions of why am I the eternal Brahman? You just are. That's his point. That's his point. So our job is not to get rid of all these doshas, these defects, and then engage in a second process of realizing the self. The self is already realized. I just need to get rid of the stupid ideas, the adhyasa, the superimpositions. Then who I am is very clear. All right, we'll quit here for today. What verse are we on for tomorrow or next week?
We're on verse 218.
Okie dokie. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.